Hey, Hope City Church family, Pastor Q here, and I'm so excited to have you join us this weekend for church, whether you're viewing somewhere in the Cedar Valley or across the amazing and beautiful state of Iowa. I want to welcome you to church this weekend. You are a part of our church family. We're closing out a teaching series we've been in this week makes week number 5, called The Reset, where we're leaning into, during these very unusual times, to refocus, recenter, and really reset the table of our homes and ultimately reset the table of our lives. And I'm excited because today you've got a little special treat. I've been joined by some of my closest Hope City Church family and friends to talk a little bit about what the reset has meant for them, not only as a series, but as they're taking some practical steps to really reset the normal of their lives. And so let me introduce you to some people who I love dearly, and I'll start with my favorite person, everybody, my amazing wife, Angela Marshall. Angela, we've been together for 25 years, going on 26 years, and there's a lot to share. You've got to tune in for a different sermon series to hear that message. But not only did you help co-found the church, but you lead all of our children's ministry, and you're an amazing mom and an amazing wife. And for all of eternity, I'll be grateful that I got to be your guy. And so thanks for joining today. Next to my amazing wife is a very, very dear sister in the Lord, a very dear friend, not just of my wife and I, but of Hope City Church, Tara Thomas-Gettman. Tara has been a part of our Hope City family really pretty much from the beginning. Tara, you and Dave and the kids have you guys have been all in, and you are actively involved in not only community relations, but really being the director of communication for the Waterloo public school system, and really beyond. I mean, you are a key influencer in our community, and I love how you've leveraged your platform, not just to make things better in the valley, but the outspoken nature of your faith and how it's impacting and shaping everything that you do. And so thank you so much for sharing today and sharing the table. Next to Tara, we've got Tim and Megan Bohr. Tim and Megan are near and dear to our hearts. Tim and Megan, I've known you two for, I think, going on 10 years now. You guys have been with us from ground one, before there was a Hope City Church, when we were just thinking about planning a church and casting the vision for that. But you guys weren't even married yet. You guys were just dating. And a lot's happened since then. We had the privilege of being a part of that special day for you guys. And some more special news has happened even during COVID. I'll let you guys share that in a little bit, but you guys are independent business owners, and man, I love the entrepreneurial spirit you have, and you live in Cedar Rapids, and you still come to church in Waterloo, and I love you guys so very much. Y'all are awesome. And then at the end of the table is Ebony King. Ebony and her husband, Trevor, are so sweet. If you haven't had a chance to meet them, if you live in the valley, you want to get to know these two. They wear their hearts on their sleeve. I see that every week as you guys are serving, as Trevor is drumming, but I also see it in the things you do outside of what's happening here at church. Ebony, you serve as the case manager for Cedar Valley Angels, which is a nonprofit organization that we love. And you're helping families, coming alongside them, supporting them as they're engaging in the work of foster care. And so thank you for choosing a career path that's leaving a lasting legacy, not just for you, but for families who are looking to establish a family. So thank you so much for that. All right. Hey, I'm excited because we're going to have some fun, open, honest, candid conversation about the reset and resetting our tables and what life has been like during this pandemic. So let me kind of give you guys the first question. We'll just kind of roll around with these questions. The first question is this. It's kind of personal. What's been the most surprising thing or inspiring, maybe challenging, heck, if you're okay with it, maybe funny thing you found out about yourself or your spouse during this pandemic? And because I've got the mic, when I share, she can't stop me. So get ready. But who wants to go first? What's been the most exciting, maybe, or even challenging thing that you've discovered about yourself or your spouse during the pandemic?
I'll jump right in. I think for me, sadly, when you are at work, as my husband and I both work outside of the home, I didn't realize how lazy I was in contrast to my spouse. He is like you. He can't sit still and probably needs to heed your message of rest. And for me, I'm probably resting too much. So during the shutdown, when we've both had the good fortune of still being able to do our jobs, but from home, every time he wants me to go with him on a walk, I really have to kind of force myself because I'm used to being at work all day where, let's be honest, I sit most of the day. And he is a teacher and an active teacher as a PE strength training teacher, always getting in 15,000 steps a day. I go a whole month before I can reach what he's trying, get stepwise. So that's the humorous side of it is I realized he's making me look bad. So I have to be more active physically and spiritually.
Yeah, that's great. That's so good. Yeah, I think for me, and I'll share, then one of you guys can share if you want to. I think probably the most challenging thing for me has been resting. It's kind of no secret. My least favorite part of the day is sleeping. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's true. But I think what's happened with the challenge of being forced to rest, it's not just my body that's dialing down, but I'm able to give my family the gift of my presence and being present. Because you can be present, your presence can be there, but you not be present really in the room. And so the challenge has been slowing down. The reward has been really getting to know my family in some ways that maybe I wouldn't have been able to because I was so busy moving from one thing to the next. So that's been a challenge and a reward during the pandemic and even the Reset series as we look at some of that rest and all that. Anyone else? Any other ideas?
I think for me, in the beginning of it, it was like, this is gonna be great, this is gonna be fun, this is gonna be like family time, and it was, and then a few weeks down the road, it was like, okay, this is getting boring and very difficult, and it's been really fun to watch you being so active to not being active, like literally sliding off the chair, like, ugh. So it's been fun to watch that.
Oh yeah, I'm the comic relief in the house. That's funny. That's funny.
Too funny. Well, for the pandemic, for me, and I guess for us, I mean, I won't speak for both of us, but for me, that new thing that Q was talking about is when this all happened, I was like 8.5 months pregnant. And I kind of knew that I was probably gonna have a baby during the middle of a pandemic. And so it came along with a lot of different feelings. I was having to learn, before all of this happened, to slow down and ask for help because I'm very much like, go, 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 do everything on my own. And when you're 9 months pregnant, it just is harder to do all of those things by yourself. So I was thankful that we had to slow down and come together and really work together as a team, and me have to learn how to ask people for help from that. And then going into the pandemic and having a child and everything like that, it came to a whole new level of having to ask for help. But the other thing that was awesome, along with slowing down, was it was cool to know that people were home and that it was easier to reach out to people that I might not have necessarily been able to talk to as much as I wanted to. So just being able to check in with people, I feel like my relationships have actually strengthened, even though I wasn't able to be face to face. Being able to get on the phone with people, because texting is the typical thing, but being able to call and say, hey, how you doing? You know, you're locked in your house. That was really awesome for me, and I hope that's something that doesn't go away.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think the pandemic for a lot of us, and you mentioned something about this too, it's kind of revealed like what in our lives is intentional and what has been a rhythm that was set by something else that we didn't decide, that when it fell off, we're like, whoa, what am I doing? And I think intentionality, of course, is very important to have. I mean, if you don't decide what you want your life to look like, someone else will dictate it for you. And when things slowed down, we were able to realize what rhythms we already had in place or what rhythms we didn't have into place. And there's a proverb, I think it's 12:24. I mean, it uses pretty strong language, you know, in regards to this, but it talks about the hand of the diligent will rule, but laziness ends in slave labor. And sometimes laziness can be more of the mind than of your hands. And I think for a lot of people, it's revealed what rhythms we had in place, what we didn't have in place. I think we had a lot in place already, which was cool, but there were other things that were like, man, this time was being filled up with this because someone else was telling us to. What do we want? Like, do we want better physical fitness? Do we want better this or that? And what rhythm can we set into place? Because now the pandemic is an ultimate reset button.
Yeah,
and it can be for the good.
Yeah, yeah. I'm young enough to remember when the video gaming console Nintendo came out, and for some of you, maybe you predate Nintendo and you remember the Atari or some other device. When Nintendo came out, it had two buttons on the front: the power button and the reset button. And this is before you could like save your current place in the game, you know? The cloud didn't exist yet. And so there was nothing worse than playing like Super Mario Brother and being at the final battle and then the game glitch. And you're like, no! And so what you try to do is try to hit reset fast enough that you could like juke the game out and not lose your spot. Well, it usually didn't work. You have to start over. But that's a good segue into my next question. What rhythms have you guys picked up? What are some things you've begun to do, because we've all had to kind of reset, that you plan on continuing doing after everything kind of begins to open up and we are able to move more freely and we're back in our home, or we're back at our work offices and at our home offices? What are some things you started doing that you're going to continue to do after the reset?
I think for us and our family, it's when we came back to plant the church, we were just extremely busy and didn't really have like family time, like our dinner time. We'd kind of just eat there, eat here, on the go, and just bringing dinner back to the table has been wonderful. Just being able to connect and answering questions. We have silly questions. So that's something that we're probably going to keep doing. It's been the connection. It's just that's great. So
I almost wonder, like a little bit of a sadness. Even last night we were being silly and goofy, and last night our 12-year-old was at the table with us. We've got a 25-year-old as well. But there was a part of me that went, why did we do this sooner?
yeah.
And it's amazing how you can eat dinner, and you can eat dinner in the living room or, in different rooms. But man, when we got around that table, I mean, the goofiness of Jonathan and just the fun interactions and the way he's answering questions, it was rich.
Yes.
So,
yeah, we're going to keep that.
We're going to keep that going. Yeah. Anyone else? Some new rhythms?
Yeah. I think that for us, I think just in general, when you're newly married, you have like these roles. You have these things that you maybe say like, oh, I'll be the one that's washing dishes and he's gonna be the one that takes out the trash and things like that. And just with this pandemic, it's been so different because he was still working in the beginning and I was working from home. And so I had to pick up a lot of things that I normally didn't do that he did. And so then it was kind of like, wow, I have a better appreciation for like what he does and what he's been doing. And so for me, I think it was just like seeing a different perspective and seeing and having a good and a great appreciation for what my husband does when I'm not around and vice versa. So
that's good. The people who are watching this, they can't see it, but your husband's here, socially distanced in the audience, and they couldn't hear it, but just my ultrasonic bro-man hearing heard him say, amen. I heard a good hearty amen from Trevor, because you see things a little bit different from his perspective. Let me turn the corner a little bit, kind of ask some spiritually related questions. A lot of this has been great relational, seeing ourselves kind of introspectively, kind of being able to reflect on what's important to us, what do we want to do differently. The Reset series, we tried to couple this natural reset we have because of the pandemic with a series of teachings that would help us kind of have some tools to discuss things around our table, to kind of shift some of our mindsets about the extra time that we have at home. It was my wife actually who said to me, she said, you know, a lot of people are ready to get back to work and ready to get things going. And there's a part of that I understand with our economy and people being out of work. She said, but really it would be important if we could really use this time around our table to kind of reset our lives. And I thought, great idea. Well, there's a passage in the Bible in Psalm 128 that talks about the table a lot. That's where we've been. He says, you know, around the table, God blesses us, and he's got good plan for us and our family, and he kind of starts outlining some of that. Week number 1, we talked about inviting the Lord to the table. Week number 2, we talked about resting. Week 3, we've talked about our families and our spouses and our children, and what does that mean to love them well, and then we close out with just God's blessing at the table. This series, was there any particular message in this series, any idea that stood out to you, something that you heard that you haven't been able to shake, it kind of got on you and you thought, I really need to lean into this? I would just love to hear what's connecting with you from this series.
I think for me, the connection or the click, the light bulb moment would be when you pose the question in one of the reset discussions for our virtual Bible study about what are you doing to bring others around your table, and that intentional connection. I was taking for granted all the face-to-face personal interactions I was having with others prior to the pandemic because it was our norm and it was an expectation that I was always going to be around people. Now, I will value when that opportunity hopefully resumes, that I will have the gift, the opportunity that God has given me to bless people with the kindness and caring and interactions that will be so much more meaningful because now I'm able to do it with that intentionality in person, whereas before I took for granted that others would always be around. And in isolation, I realized that those moments can be fleeting and they can end in an instant. So we better value the connections we make personally and maximize the potential to share what God has done for us to bring others into his kingdom.
That's so good, Tara. That's really good.
It's really good. I was going to say about your message about rest. I've heard it was good. I was busy doing 5 things at the time, so I didn't quite get it. But no, actually, it was great. I was focused on it, and I think that spoke to me the most. And I forget how you worded it during the message, but you talked about rest allows us to separate our identity from what we do, you know, what we do from who we are. And I think it was Psalm 127 when it talks about, unless the Lord builds the house, the laborer labors in vain. And as someone like you, who my wife can attest to, never sleeping, always thinking about the next thing to put together, resting allows me to give that time to the Lord and to make sure that what I'm doing is his will, because if I want it to be all about me, I'm the type of person that's willing to work hard enough to force it to happen, but to take that rest makes it be on him, which is really, really good. And that's what's so interesting about everything that God asks of us. This was a humbling moment for me years ago. When it comes to our finances, or when it comes to our time, when it comes to how we spend our day, I'm sure everybody can relate to, like, man, I just wish I actually prayed more. I wish I actually read the Bible more. And there's times when we don't get it done. Something that helped me a lot is God doesn't ask for the most. He asks for the first. Like, he doesn't ask for 90% of our income. He asks for the first 10. He doesn't ask for us to pray 24 hours a day. He just asks that we seek him first. That's a big weight off my shoulders, you know, to like make sure that he's first priority. Really good. And then that rest, giving that time to make sure that comes into play.
That's really good. And I think you just found another job.
Well, I got to be able to rest, Pastor, so
Go for it.
Yeah, I enjoyed the part when you talked about training a child in the way that they should go, and you referenced it to a directional aspect of it. And so I just want to, like, we have a resource for you guys, your parents, on our Hope City webpage. Like, take advantage of that. If you do anything, and it would be train your child in the way that they should go. There's plenty of direction on there. Our staff, Lou and Tabitha, have done a great job at giving you guys that resource. Take advantage of that. So that's just been really helpful even just for my own
Yeah.
with Jonathan and our children is just it's not just like you said whipping them into shape,
Right.
but it's like leading them into a direction.
Yeah.
So that just was a reminder, like, hey, this is time to be intentional.
That's right. Yeah, a couple of big ideas that have come out is so good. I wish we had more time. I mean, time's flying by. That the idea of training them, I always thought it meant like, get out there, do some push-ups, boy, but really it's training like you train a plant. Tim, you said something in the series, this whole idea of separating our identity from our duty, or our identity from our job, or this whole idea of my identity isn't directly connected to what I'm doing. It actually came from a wife. So it's out, everyone. The secret's out. All of my messages come from my wife. And so she said, there's a difference between being and doing. And so much of our identity comes from doing that that idea really arrested me. And I thought, man, Lord, I need you to help me see that you love me for who I am and not for what I do. And that's true for you. I don't know where you're at or kind of what life circumstance you find yourself in. And I don't know if the whole world's crashing around you. And you look around and everything seems like life has dealt you a bad hand, maybe. Maybe you've went so far as to think you've done something and now you deserve everything that's happening. Maybe you feel like life is against you. And it's starting not only to affect what's happening around you, but it's beginning to affect the way that you see yourself and even where you fit in this life. Can I just tell you that God says you're His, and that there's nothing that can separate you from His love. In His word, He actually says it. He says those words. He says, not life, not death, not things present, not things to come, not angels, not demons, not sickness. He says, nothing in all of creation can separate you from the love of God that's found in Jesus Christ. So today, my prayer is that your heart would get settled there, that you are seen, you are known, you are loved. And His love for you isn't based off of what you've done or what you do, but it's based off of who He is and what He says about you. And if you've never begun a relationship with our Father in heaven, then in a few minutes, I would love the privilege to introducing you to our Father and inviting you to His table. Tara, you said something about valuing the relationships that we have, and in a new way, because we kind of take for granted that we see everyone every day, and sometimes our work demands that we're constantly in relationship, but really evaluating who's at the table, who have I invited to my table. I remember that message in preparing it, and this thought struck me as I thought through my mother's table and how she lived. And what I realized is that who you invite to your table says a lot about what you value. And as I think about Jesus and the people that He had at His table, I mean, thank God He had room for a guy like me. It wasn't just the people who could transactionally better His life. He valued people for who they were in their stories, even when their stories had great hardship. As you've thought about your table, so in life going forward, you're in a reset group. You alluded to that a little bit. What has that been like for you? Has there been some learning, some exciting things? Tell us a little bit about that online reset group.
The gift of connecting in community, as Pastor Q always encourages us to do, because you can be a part of a church, you can watch a service online, and you still may feel that disconnectedness.
Yeah.
So the personal connection that we don't have to literally make in person, thanks to technology, we can connect virtually. And for me, co-hosting our reset group with my daughter, who's a teenager, it's been so impactful to have other mothers and daughters pour life into her and speak their truth into her, because we all know that coming from mom and coming from dad, it may not resonate like it does coming from peers and other adults. So that's been the blessing of the Reset group, is to be speaking truth and life and love into my children through the wisdom and voice of other Christians.
That's amazing. Yeah, I saw that group and I thought, oh my gosh, Tara, I love you. And so just you and Charlotte, and really, you know, one of the things we talked about in week number 3, there's these kind of 5 behaviors that if you'll create the framework, then your children can grow according to that framework. And one of them was serving with your children. Not just telling them what to do, but doing it with them. Because our children, they follow what we model. And so, you're watching this somewhere, and the people closest to you are paying attention to what you're doing. So hey, good job. What you're modeling, you're giving them a framework for following. As we prepare to close out our time together, I alluded to it earlier. The Bible paints this picture of God as a father whose arms are open wide and he extends an invitation. One of my favorite stories is in Luke 15 of a boy who's called the prodigal son. This idea that he looked at his life and spent a lot of it on things that didn't really amount to much. And he kind of comes to this moment where he wants something different. And so he decides to return home. Some of you can identify with that. And I want to invite you to return home. And as you return home, I want to invite you to join us next week for a new teaching series called The Life-Giving Church, where we'll give you a fresh perspective on what it means to be a part of this family. Until then, can I invite you home to our Father? Will you pray with me? Father, I pray for every person listening. I pray that you'd give them the confidence and the courage to know that you're a kind and loving Father, that your heart is big and there's nothing we could do so bad that you couldn't forgive. There's nothing so broke that it can't be fixed. We're all returning from somewhere and recovering from something. And now it's time to come home. And if that's your desire, please come home. In Jesus' name. God bless you, and I'll see you next week.